Hey folks, thanks for joining us today. My name is Adrian San Miguel. I am a principal partner enterprise architect, and joining me in about 3 seconds is going to be my co-host. How are we doing today?
Doing great, sir. Doing great.
Gonna go ahead and introduce yourself quickly, Brian.
All right. My name is Brian Terry, and I'm a senior partner solution architect at AWS, and I'm super excited to be here at reInvent.
Yeah. Fun fact: Brian and I kind of go way back a little bit. We tend to know a lot of the same people, and the running gag here at Amazon, especially at AWS, is you kind of get to know everybody that knows everybody. And it turns out we're kind of both sides of the same coin, where he knows the same people, I know the same people, but we never actually, in my almost 7 years here, have actually worked together. So glad to finally be able to do that with you.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Yeah, I've been doing AWS On Air this whole year from my gym in my basement, and now I'm out of my basement, and I'm actually here live, so I'm super excited, man.
Yeah, it is nice to get out of the basement, see some sunlight. A lot of people think that we tend to be robots. In the last one, I had to keep explaining some random platypus facts for people. It's interesting to be able to get out, get into reInvent, very much experience real people and solve real problems. And what really drew me here, I don't know about you, Brian, is the idea of working with different service teams and different customers to get to solve really cool and tough problems.
Oh yeah, I'm always excited to do that, and I'm always excited to meet the people in person. So like, if you're here at reInvent, please walk up and say hi. I want to meet you. I want to hear what you're building on AWS. We can have a chat.
Did you get your little wheelie thing spun to the right color?
Yeah.
I think mine still might be on red, but I'll deal with that after we're done here. But it is going to be pretty cool. Today, we've got a really interesting and a really exciting session that we're going to be teeing up. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite things, storage. Uh, I came from a data center background. I spent a lot of my time being the poor sod that had to rack new storage arrays and rack and ice scuzzy everything and get it ordered up. It's kind of the way that I paid my way into the current role that I am. And we're going to be talking today about FSX or ONTAP, and we are going to be joined by an individual that was instrumental in the creation and development of this service. So I'd like to kick it off over to you, Jay, to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Adrian. So I just wanted to say that, my daughter has a platypus. It's a little stuffed blue-footed platypus named Chili. So we are familiar
Ah,
with those conversations.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
So,
was hoping you were going to say the other name with the fedora, but hey, I understand.
oh, yeah, Perry's a good one too. I think we're all familiar with that character, but there's licensing constructs around that. So we can't be too liberal with what we can say there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for the introduction. I'm a senior solutions architect on the Worldwide Specialist Organization, and I'm what they refer to as a service aligned solutions architect. So that means I get to just focus on one specific service. For me, that's FSX for NetApp ONTAP. And as part of my role, I get to write a feedback package each and every year that gathers together all of our customers' most impactful feature releases that they would like to see coming forward. And
Yep.
last year, a little more than a year ago, this was the number one feature that customers asked for, and we bubbled that up to the service team, and it's been a fantastic journey as they've executed on that and brought it to market just yesterday. So we're all very excited to talk about scale out for FSX for NetApp ONTAP.
Man, this is super interesting. I'm super excited to hear about the solution. But I'm going to step back a little bit. Let's talk. Can you talk a little bit about why these new capabilities are needed in FSX?
Sure. So the new capabilities for FSX for NetApp ONTAP have to do with the ability to scale your single file system to a much larger size by adding nodes into a clustered environment. So you talked a little bit about racking and stacking hardware in a data center, and that's very much what it's like when you deploy FSX for NetApp ONTAP in AWS. You still have to provision these highly available clustered pairs. And previously, you were limited to just one pair. And the automated infrastructure was not in place yet for us to be able to scale that horizontally so that we could scale out by adding more and more clustered pairs. But now we've built all that automation in place. So it's important for customers to be able to do that as their workloads grow beyond the boundaries of what a single HA pair could support, which is much more similar to what ONTAP customers in on-premises data centers do in most of their instances.
Yeah,
Yes.
that definitely resonates. You're kind of awakening the painful old memories of thinking you get it right and having it rack stack zone provision formatted, get the thing, start copying things over, then you realize you missed it. You need to either grow it, you need to add additional throughput, you need additional spindles, you need more IOPS. Hey, you completely messed up the way that you zoned, and unfortunately, because of the limitations of fiber switching, you have to do it all over. I don't miss those things whatsoever, and would really be interested in hearing, quantifiably hundreds of thousands of hours of my time spent doing that over the years. How that has been simplified to take that level of burden away from the customer, so they can just focus on building their application, running it on storage, and then just leaving the undifferentiated heavy lifting to us.
You hit the nail on the head. The undifferentiated heavy lifting of trying to provision one of these file systems and getting it right, as you mentioned too, is one of the hardest parts. When I was a storage administrator, which has been many years ago, we had to budget well in advance because we had to deploy enough storage and storage capabilities to last us 3 to 5 years. And so we had to upfront the cost for that. We had to deploy that infrastructure and spend those hours rolling that out. And the cloud really does change all that. And by enabling this for FSx for NetApp ONTAP is just one more feature that we've cloudified or servicified by putting in a fully automated product like this. So there's no more patching, there's no more cabling, there's no more making sure that you have the right firmware installed on all the different components that make up this file system on the back end. It's all automated and fully handled for you as part of the managed part of the service. So yes, that tremendously reduces the amount of undifferentiated heavy lifting that our customers have to do in order to be able to take advantage of all the great features that FSx for NetApp ONTAP has.
Awesome. I can imagine what customers are thinking about the solution. They're like, wow, this is great. But I think one of the bigger questions they're going to ask is like, what kind of performance can I expect from this?
That's fantastic. So previously we were limited to a single HA pair, and those HA pairs were kind of capped out at around 4 gigabytes of throughput, around 160,000 IOPS. So now we're able to scale that up to 6 nodes and now larger node sizes as well, which will enable us to scale all the way to 36 gigabytes of throughput per second and up to 1.2 million IOPS in a single file system.
Wait, you said gigabyte, capital B, right?
Capital B, gigabytes. So I didn't do the math on that. That would be
We're lazy.
a lot of gigabits. Yeah.
Yeah, all you have to do is just tell everybody it's a capital. That's crazy. So 36 gigabytes plus round about 1.2 million IOPS. Is that that's something that a customer, if they come to you today and say, hey, Jay, we are really in need of, we need 1 million IOPS right now. We have a flash storage array in the data center for our HPC workload that's tied to some sort of AIML implementation, and this has been historically the blocker, the thing that keeps us from going to cloud. Is that something that we can now work with these customers to say, hey, this is where you need to go when you land, this is where we can put you? Is it starting to sound like we're solving for the difficult pieces in that type of resistance, or even just the last stumbling block before we get a customer into cloud as a specific use case?
Yeah. So workload is key. So that's the most important part of the conversations that I have with my large enterprise customers, which are the ones that are demanding these features and capabilities, the performance specifically. They have operationalized their workloads to run on top of ONTAP or a similar file system in their data center. And it has been a problem for them to migrate those workloads to the cloud because the performance and the file system specific features and capabilities just haven't been there in a matching way. We refer to it as like for like, and this brings us one step closer to the like for like capabilities, for especially around performance that customers do have in their data center now. So, and you mentioned a few different workloads, but it is things like AIML specific workloads, but also electronic design analysis, the EDA workloads. There's media and entertainment workloads, rendering workloads that are very large with this, genomics infrastructure that's running on this type of platform, and there are several others as well.
So this sounds like a very powerful solution, right? It does this kind of performance for you, it does this kind of scaling. What does the customer experience look like for this?
So I'm glad you asked. So we brought the full set of features all the way to the console. So that was kind of one of the main things that we were really driving forward to be able to release here at reInvent this year, and we were successful. So we do have a full featured console experience, as well as I have some things that I can show you as well around what the performance looks like for the full featured set of CloudWatch monitoring as well.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. It's one thing to slap the lid and say we can get 1 million IOPS on this baby, but when you have to go through and perform your validation, your platform accreditations, or you have a customer that you may have an SLA or an SLO, service level agreement, or service level, I forget what the objective is.
Objective, yeah.
You have to be able to quantify, stratify, say, hey, here's the thing where we did our tuning and testing. Yeah, we'd love to see that too.
Awesome. So I'm not sure if you can see my screen or not.
Yep, can.
I can.
Awesome, great. So if you're not familiar with FSX, it's our file system X. There are several different members of this product family, but if you've never launched one before, you log into your AWS console, this is the splash page that you would see. There's a big orange button that says Create File System. And then we've got the 4 different file systems that are part of the offering today. We'll talk about FSX for NetApp ONTAP this afternoon, but there are several others, and if you click on them, it gives you a little overview. Now, this hasn't really changed, but what has changed is some of the features that are now being offered in terms of scale out. One thing I did want to point out is that if you click the quick create button, which is sort of the minimum viable configuration, you're not going to get the option to see what you could build in terms of specifying the throughput capacity beyond a single HA pair. And the reason that we've set that up that way is because we feel that most of the customers that are looking for this advanced set of capabilities and enhanced performance are not going to be the minimum viable set of deployment options. They're going to want the full set of features. So if you click the standard create button instead, then the big change that you'll see is now there are many, many more throughput options all the way up to that 36 gigabits of throughput that we talked about a little bit earlier. So this is what the big difference is. This is what we're now starting to offer, is scaling this to multiple HA pairs, all within a single availability zone. So there are a lot of other options in terms of how much capacity. The one thing that I did want to show also is that if you don't know exactly how much capacity you need or what that's going to add up to, you could specify just a number, and it'll give you sort of a roundabout way to say, oh, I might want this one, I might want that one, somewhere in the middle, we can say. So it does sort of predict what you might want to deploy based on the numbers that you can manually enter, as well as just picking from a list. And all the other network and security group stuff that's in here is pretty much default. I haven't deployed anything fancy. This is a default VPC with a default security group in the default private, put this in a private subnet. And it uses key pairs for everything because all of the data stored in FSX for NetApp ONTAP is encrypted by default, which is standard for all of our file systems. I'm not going to specify a password here because I don't want to enter this in, but if you just look through the rest of this, it's all basically pre-populated with a working set of configurations. The one thing that I do want to point out is that still, this has always been the case, but still storage efficiency by default is disabled. That's not the recommended configuration. Recommended configuration is enabled, but we like to have it disabled for some very specific workloads. But for almost every customer, please enable this because you are going to get some deduplication, compression, and compaction for just about everything. Is there a question? Yep.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The immediate thing that comes to mind is how fall down easy could it be? We see this pretty straightforward to go through and quickly do this within console. To get started, they slice their file system, they give it performance characteristics parameters, they get the network config, they launch it, and then they get going and they start using it. Is there any type of warm-up period, or as soon as you hit that button, is that customer provisioned, ready to go, and start leveraging the file system to its absolute fullest, or is there a period, kind of like a baking period, what we traditionally see like in the storage process?
Great question. So there is, as is indicated by the amount of infrastructure that's getting deployed on the back end as part of this, it does take a little while to provision, usually about 30 minutes or so for it to provision all the networking and the clusters and the interconnects and the instances and all that. But then once it is up and running, it does come up with a full set of IP addresses that you can access for your endpoints, and that's how you can connect to your file system.
Wow, and at that point, it's just mounting the file system and going off to the races. That's a pretty darn slick. I wish, way back in the yesteryears, we could do something similar to this. Versus, all right, cool, we racked it, we stacked it, we cabled it, we zoned it. It's on VMware. It's one of 2 tiers, and now we've got to wait a week for the storage to actually get profiled and actually be at a usable point before we can get this in production. And it certainly sounds like y'all really did think about this, and it factored in heavily into the decision of how you architect. That's pretty
Yeah, it
fantastic.
was really important for us to make this as simple for customers as we possibly could, and it still is it has quite a few steps that you had to click through in order to get this provisioned in a way that's usable for a large number of different applications and workloads. But it's far simplified from deploying your own. And one of the things about FSx ONTAP is that is indicated by the name. It is NetApp ONTAP's operating system that we're offering as a first-party service. And part of that integration and collaboration between our two companies is that they've offered ONTAP as a cloud offering for a number of years, which made it relatively easy for us to serviceify this and offer it in such a fashion. But it is far simpler doing it this way than it is even with their own offering. Because even if you deploy in the cloud with the NetApp version of this through the marketplace or whatever, it still is a matter of choosing what EC2 instances you want, building the networks manually, and making sure you've got the right version of software installed, and then manually updating the software. And there's a lot of other additional steps to deploy that virtual, what they call Cloud Volumes ONTAP, versus having this as a service. And the most important part of this is there is no other scale out version of this available except for what we have as our first party service offering. So this is the only version of ONTAP in the cloud that scales horizontally across multiple nodes and multiple HA pairs.
What I'm noticing in this console that's really sparked my interest is I see a lot of buttons for update. So you can talk a little bit about what those kind of do and what would you do to scale this?
Sure. So you can scale the capacity as much as, to the maximum capacity of what it supports today. And each of the different update buttons allows you to scale the different components of the infrastructure on demand to your workload. So as you guys were talking about a little bit earlier, you don't necessarily have to have it built to support the full workload as it will be in 5 years. You can deploy today for what you're beginning to consume in the cloud. And this was really important for customers that are starting to begin to migrate from on-premises to the cloud. And we talked about the workloads and we talked about the specific customers and unblocking a lot of their capabilities. I don't really probably have time to go into all of the features and capabilities of ONTAP, but suffice it to say that they've been in the market for about 30 years, and they have a tremendous amount of proprietary pieces of the ONTAP operating system that customers have come to rely on to operationalize big parts of those applications, specifically around things like taking snapshots and doing replication to secondary regions and providing for disaster recovery and business continuity and creating test dev environments off of clones of their volumes. And these are things that are unique to ONTAP in the way that it handles that. And when I speak to some of our very large customers that have fully operationalized on ONTAP, they haven't previously been able to migrate to the cloud because those features weren't available, or at least not available at scale. So now that they are, they're beginning to have those conversations that they can move that whole workload without having to change the way that they do all of the other mechanisms around their specific application. And that's huge for big companies because big companies, they often take a long time to change their operational mechanisms. So if they have a whole checkout process for doing QA and DR and for doing business continuity operations, they want to stick to that and do things the same way that they always have. And now they can. So that's really impactful for them.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd certainly say so. And then being able to not only ensure you pay for exactly what you need and what you need and have the availability to scale up, but to be able to report directly on it. I know many different businesses and configurations because they're finally in tune, especially these days, with what they're spending and how they're spending and what the ROI is. And it's as you mentioned, I would assume that if you can enable a customer to start that migration to cloud and lower their overall spend and increase their deployment velocity and the value to their customers, it's kind of a happy marriage and being able to give them something that they need, want, and would love to use in a place where they can use it to help them achieve their mission. It's kind of a weird roundabout way to say that the storage is actually no longer a means to the end; it's a means to get to the end.
Exactly. It is very important for a lot of customers that just previously have not been able to get the capacity and scale and still have the ability to do all the things that we, snapshots and replication, all the other things that they do, especially multi-protocol being the key differentiator for ONTAP, which is being able to access via SMB and CIFS and NFS both. Those workloads are Windows and Linux clients both together accessing the same files at the same time.
Yep, versus having to have a separate one for every different protocol. So,
Exactly.
the bane of my existence 20 years ago.
Yeah. So I did want to point out real quick that a big piece of the scale out mechanism is that each of the nodes ends up having its own IP address, but we're using Route 53, believe it or not, in order to achieve round robin DNS in order to load balance the workload across the different nodes. In this case, there's only 2 nodes. So there's 2 IP addresses for management and NFS, SMB access. But we access them together through a specific namespace. And that namespace is unified across the entire cluster, which is what really customers were asking for. They needed more capacity, more performance out of essentially what amounts to a single file share, a single export. And that's exactly what we've achieved with this deployment.
Awesome, Jay. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today and giving us that deep dive into this exciting piece of technology. Do you have any additional questions before we wrap up, Brian? Or you think you're set?
Awesome.
Yeah. So where can people find out more information about this service? And there are blogs or links?
Sure. There was a blog the announcement came out yesterday, so that's live on our webpage, and I've seen posts on LinkedIn.